This is Taiwan, an island of just 36,197 square kilometers, about the size of Maryland, home to 23 million people, compressed into a mountainous strip of land in East Asia. Look at the map. To the west is mainland China, separated by the Taiwan Strait. To the east, the open Pacific Ocean. To the north, Japan. To the south, the Philippines. Taiwan sits directly in the middle of Asia's busiest trade routes. Ships moving between Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia pass nearby. Geography gives Taiwan access, but geography did not make Taiwan rich. In 2025, Taiwan's GDP per capita is roughly $37,000 in nominal terms. In purchasing power parity, it exceeds $75,000, comparable to advanced European economies. But income is not the real story. The real story is chips. In 2025, Taiwan's semiconductor industry generates more than $160 billion in annual revenue. That equals roughly 7% of Taiwan's total GDP directly, and far more indirectly through exports and supply chains. One company dominates this ecosystem, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. TSMC controls about 60 to 70% of the global pure-play foundry market in 2025. Even more critical, Taiwan produces more than 90% of the world's most advanced logic chips below 5 nanometers. Every advanced AI processor, every cutting-edge smartphone chip, most high-performance computing processors, manufactured in Taiwan. So how did a resource-poor island become the most strategically important manufacturing hub in the digital economy? The answer starts decades before advanced chips. In the 1950s and 1960s, Taiwan was largely agricultural. It exported rice and sugar. Income levels were modest, but policymakers pursued export-led industrialization. Land reform increased equality. Education investment built human capital. Small and medium-sized enterprises became the backbone of manufacturing. By the 1980s, Taiwan was already one of the Asian tigers. Then came the strategic pivot. Instead of remaining in low-cost assembly, Taiwan moved up the value chain into semiconductors. In 1987, Morris Chang founded TSMC. The model was revolutionary. TSMC would not design chips. It would only manufacture them for others. At the time, most semiconductor firms were vertically integrated. They designed and fabricated their own chips. TSMC separated design from manufacturing. Economists call this specialization and division of labor. It dramatically lowered barriers to entry. Firms like Apple, Nvidia, AMD, and Qualcomm could focus on design while outsourcing fabrication. This created network effects. The more firms relied on TSMC, the more advanced TSMC became. The more advanced TSMC became, the more firms depended on it. By 2025, Taiwan's foundries control roughly 3/4 of global contract chip manufacturing revenue. This dominance created what analysts call the Silicon Shield. China considers Taiwan part of its sovereign territory and has repeatedly stated its goal of reunification.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has reiterated his territorial claims to Taiwan, saying unification is inevitable.
Beijing has not ruled out the use of force. But here's the economic paradox. China depends heavily on semiconductors. So does the United States. So does Europe. If production in Taiwan stops, global supply chains freeze. Automotive factories halt. AI data centers stall. Smartphone production collapses. When Russia disrupted energy markets, inflation surged globally. A semiconductor shock would be broader and faster. Interdependence increases the economic cost of conflict. Now compare Taiwan with South Korea. South Korea is home to Samsung, a global leader in memory chips. But memory is cyclical and price volatile. Advanced logic chips, the brains of AI systems, carry higher margins and strategic leverage. Taiwan focused on that segment. Compare Taiwan with the United States. The US designs many of the world's most powerful chips, but allowed large-scale manufacturing capacity to migrate overseas over decades. In response, Washington passed the CHIPS and Science Act, allocating over $50 billion to rebuild domestic fabrication. TSMC is investing tens of billions in Arizona, but production costs in the US remain significantly higher due to labor, construction, and supply chain factors. Taiwan retained scale efficiency and accumulated expertise. By late 2025, TSMC is transitioning toward 2-nanometer technology using gate-all-around transistor architecture. Only a handful of companies globally can even attempt this. Each advanced fabrication plant costs tens of billions of dollars. Extreme ultraviolet lithography machines exceed $150 million per unit. TSMC consumes a substantial share of Taiwan's electricity supply. Fabrication also requires massive volumes of ultra-pure water. Taiwan faces earthquakes, energy constraints, geopolitical tension, yet it continues expanding. Why? Because semiconductor manufacturing has extreme economies of scale. The further ahead you move, the harder it becomes for competitors to catch up. Late entrants face enormous capital barriers and technological complexity. China is investing heavily to build its own semiconductor capabilities, but it remains several generations behind in cutting-edge logic manufacturing. The constraint is not only capital, it is ecosystem depth, suppliers, engineers, process integration, and decades of tacit knowledge. Taiwan's advantage is systemic. Semiconductors alone are not 100% of Taiwan's economy. The island also leads in electronics manufacturing, precision machinery, and ICT hardware supply chains. But chips are the apex sector. They anchor exports, drive productivity, and elevate wages. Taiwan did not become rich from oil. It did not become rich from minerals. It became rich by mastering the most complex manufacturing process in modern history. China is geographically hundreds of times larger. The United States has a much larger economy. Japan has deeper capital markets. Yet Taiwan sits at the center of the digital world. The real question is not whether Taiwan is wealthy. The real question is whether the global economy can tolerate this level of dependence on one island. Because if Taiwan's fabs stop, the digital economy stops with them. And that is leverage very few nations in history have ever possessed.